The story of Niĝin does not begin in the barren desolation of the modern desert, but in an ancient world where the horizon was a constant, shimmering canvas of vibrant blue and emerald green. To the modern visitor traveling through southern Iraq, the ruins of Tell Zurghul present a haunting, hostile vista, a series of sun-baked, wind-scoured clay mounds rising like ghosts out of a vast, salt-crusted plain. The heat creates deceptive mirages, and the dust chokes out all memory of life. But our May 2026 geoarchaeological excavation has stripped away this arid, dry skin of the earth to expose the long-hidden, wet heart of a maritime empire. 5,000 years ago, the sea was not a distant boundary. It was a living, breathing, and terrifying presence right at the city's gates. During the mid-Holocene epoch, a geographical phenomenon known as the marine transgression was at its peak. The waters of the Persian Gulf, driven by post-glacial sea level rises, pushed nearly 200 kilometers further inland than the modern coastline we see today. Because of this, Niģin was not a city built on solid ground, but an intricate, sprawling archipelago of the marshes, a dense network of artificial and natural mud brick islands floating precariously within a labyrinth of deep-water canals, pristine reed-lined lagoons, and turbulent tidal estuaries. This was the true Sumerian Venice. If you were to stand on the high terraces of the city's central temple 5 millennia ago, the sounds filling the air would be entirely foreign to our modern concept of Mesopotamia. There was no clatter of hooves, no rumbling of wooden wheels on dry earth, and no dust storms. Instead, the acoustic landscape of Niģin was defined by the deep, rhythmic dip of heavy wooden oars, the complex calls of marsh bird hunters, the rustling of giant Phragmites reeds in the Gulf breeze, and the heavy splashing of woven flax fishing nets pulling tons of silver bounty from the brackish waters. To the ancient Sumerians, this aquatic world was the physical manifestation of the Abzu, the primeval subterranean ocean of pure, sweet freshwater ruled by Enki, the god of wisdom, magic, and creation. In Sumerian creation myths, the cosmos began when the fresh waters of the Abzu mingled with the bitter, salty waters of the sea, represented by the primordial dragon goddess Tiamat. Niģin sat precisely at the geographic crossroads of this divine collision. It was a place where the incoming ocean tides violently met the rushing freshwater floods of the ancient Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We found the undeniable physical proof of this mythological boundary line hidden deep within the geological strata at the base of the Tell Zurghul mound during our 2026 field season. Using deep-core drilling rigs, our team bypassed the thousands of years of wind-blown desert sand to reach the foundational layers of the early dynastic period. What emerged from the core tubes was spectacular: thick, dense, jet-black strata of organic marsh silt. This suffocatingly dark mud was packed with millions of microscopic, fossilized shell fragments belonging to Corbicula fluminales and brackish-water marine mollusks. This is the indelible biological signature of an ancient tidal ecosystem, a direct, physical confirmation that the Persian Gulf once surged against these very walls. The people who engineered Niģin were what we must call masters of the edge. In a spiritual sense, they viewed themselves as the chosen caretakers of Niģin, the daughter of Enki, whom the pantheon assigned to rule over the fish, the waterfowl, and the sacred delta tidal pools. But in a practical sense, these people were highly sophisticated logistical innovators. They occupied an ecosystem that, while unpredictable and prone to devastating seasonal floods, provided the most caloric-dense, protein-rich resources in the ancient world. By mastering the water, the silent lineage of Niģin did not merely survive at the edge of the world. They built a wealthy, bureaucratic powerhouse out of nothing but mud, reeds, and water. At the absolute center of this vibrant, floating archipelago stood the towering architectural anchor of the city, the Isarara, the great terrace temple of Niģin, the Lady of the Marshes, while later, more detached generations of the Babylonian and Assyrian periods would simplify her complex nature, reducing her to a mystical deity of dream interpretation and localized water spirits. The administrative archives of the Niĝin fish tablet reveal a far more formidable true identity. Niġin was not just a figure of quiet devotion. She was the supreme divine chief executive of a massive, aggressively centralized, state-run aquatic economy. The raw data and logistical networks preserved on these clay tablets are absolutely staggering in their scale. We are not looking at the informal, small-scale trading of a primitive fishing village. We are looking at a highly organized, industrial-scale processing and distribution empire. The temple ledgers do not record fish by the handful, but by the gur, a massive standard unit of volume equivalent to hundreds of liters. The tablets catalog thousands of woven reed baskets overflowing with specific, carefully categorized marine life. The suur, the giant, fat marsh carp, the gud, the sturdy river barbel, along with various specialized saltwater species migrating inland from the brackish Gulf estuaries. Every single catch was meticulously harvested, instantly preserved through industrial salting pits to halt decay in the intense Mesopotamian heat, and then funneled through a ruthless bureaucratic machine that tracked every single unit of energy and calorie moving through the state. To understand the sheer magnitude of this operation, one must imagine the daily scene playing out at the grand stone docks of Niģin at the first break of dawn. The morning mist would rise off the brackish water, thick and heavy, carrying the sharp scent of salt, wet mud, and currying fish. Through the reeds, a massive flotilla would materialize. Hundreds of slender, crescent-shaped reed transport boats, known as magur, their hulls waterproofed with thick coats of black bitumen. They arrived in precise, synchronized waves, deeply laden with the night's harvest from the outer marshes. As the boats bumped against the limestone quays, the temple scriptorium went to work. Scribes, trained from childhood in the rigorous art of administrative calculation, stood directly on the docks. Clutching wet, freshly pressed clay tablets in their left hands and sharpened reed styluses in their right, they marked down the weights, counts, and exact species with practiced, blinding speed. They used complex, early numerical systems to audit the inbound protein before it was transferred to the vast, dark storage vaulted cellars of the Isarara. This was the true, silent lineage of the marshes, a fiercely practical, highly literate elite who had successfully mastered the chaotic logistics of the tide. In Niģin, mythology and economics were entirely indistinguishable. The rhythmic rise and fall of the ocean tides were viewed as the literal breath of the gods, a divine clock governing the delivery of wealth. To these people, the natural world was raw data waiting to be ordered. Every fish brought to shore was a physical unit of currency used to pay wages, secure trade alliances, and feed the labor forces digging the empire's canals. Every giant reed pulled from the water was a structural building block used to weave the very foundations of their floating civilization. While the people of Niģin were masters of the water below, engineering their lives around the predictable pulse of the tides, they were equally obsessed with the dark, silent ocean spanning the sky above. To the Sumerian mind, the heavens were not a void, but an upper sea, a celestial mirror where the gods wrote their intentions in the language of the stars. In the subterranean vaults of the British Museum sits a small, circular clay disc, barely 18 centimeters across, catalogued as the K8538 planisphere. Discovered in the ruined library of King Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, it was dismissed for decades by mainstream historians as nothing more than a late-period Assyrian astrological curiosity, marred by unusual geometric doodles. However, modern computer-aided trajectory modeling and astronomical back calculations have shattered that dismissive narrative, revealing a much deeper, terrifying secret. This disk is a meticulous scribe's copy of a highly sophisticated data log recording the night sky on a very specific date, June 29, 3123 BCE. The surface of the planisphere is divided with geometric precision into 8 distinct, pie-shaped segments, like a cosmic wheel. Each segment functions as an observational quadrant, depicting known Mesopotamian constellations such as the Pleiades, Gemini, and Pegasus, all mapped using archaic cuneiform notation. But etched across this traditional stellar map is something that should not be there, an anomaly that standard astronomy could not explain. A series of precise, straight geometrical lines and intersecting angles track the hypervelocity trajectory of a foreign body tearing through the atmosphere. It was a kilometer-scale asteroid, slicing across the sky at a dangerously low, shallow angle. In the sacred texts of Sumerian mythology, the sky was the playground of the Anunnaki, and the arrival of such an object was never viewed as a random, meaningless cosmic accident. This screaming streak of fire was immediately identified as the messenger of Enlil, the god of storms, breath, and royal decrees. Enlil was a deity known for his low tolerance of human noise and chaos, often utilizing the elements to force humanity into submission. The scribes who sat on the temple towers of Niĝin did not just watch this streak of white-hot plasma out of curiosity. They logged its vector because they believed they were witnessing a deliberate, divine reordering of the world. The trajectory data preserved on the K8538 disk suggests the object crossed over the Mediterranean, superheating the air beneath it, before plunging directly into the Austrian Alps, triggering what geologists call the Kerfuffle's impact. The explosion did not need to hit Mesopotamia directly to alter its fate. The impact sent a catastrophic thermal plume and supersonic atmospheric shockwaves rippling across the globe, instantly disrupting global weather patterns and causing massive, abrupt shifts in atmospheric pressure. For the fragile Sumerian Venice, this cosmic signature in the sky was the silent beginning of the end. A highly specialized civilization entirely dependent on the hyper-precise, delicate timing of oceanic tides, seasonal monsoon rains, and stable river cycles cannot survive a sudden, violent shift in the Earth's equilibrium. Our May 2026 soil cores taken at Tell Zurghul have captured the exact physical aftermath of this cosmic event. Trapped within the sedimentary layers is what geoarchaeologists call a hydrological jerk. At a specific depth corresponding to the turn of the 3rd millennium BCE, the soil samples reveal a sudden, chaotic disruption. The river channels of the Tigris and Euphrates Delta, which had remained locked in stable, predictable courses for centuries, suddenly began to violently meander, split, and migrate. The water was moving away from the canals, and with the retreat of the water, the countdown to Niģin's silence had begun. As the deep river channels violently shifted away from the city's complex stone docks, the citizens of the Sumerian Venice found themselves facing a slow-motion, generational apocalypse. The water was abandoning them, and in its place came a quiet, creeping terror. In the sacred myths of the Abzu, the god Enki had long warned humanity of the white curse, a catastrophic phenomenon where the very earth turns white and sterile when the life-giving freshwater fails. To the final generations of Niģin, this was not a metaphorical curse or a poetic myth invented by the priesthood. It was a ruthless, inescapable chemical reality. As the volume of freshwater flowing down from the Tigris and Euphrates Delta plummeted due to the tectonic and atmospheric river migration, the heavy, dense saltwater from the Persian Gulf met no resistance. It began to push relentlessly inland, snaking up the ancient canals in a phenomenon modern hydrologists call a salt wedge. This subterranean brine poisoned the entire fragile brackish ecosystem from the roots up. Our May 2026 sediment analysis at Tell Zurghul has captured this terrifying ecological transition with perfect, heartbreaking precision. In the core samples, the healthy, deep layers of dark, organic marsh silt, rich with the signs of a thriving Venice, are suddenly cut off. They are replaced by a stark, blinding layer of white, crystalline salt crusts embedded directly into the ancient soil matrix. The engineering response from the silent lineage of Niĝin was both heroic and desperate. Refusing to abandon their floating empire, the Sumerians mobilized massive labor forces. They dug deeper and deeper canals, threw up monumental mud levees, and attempted to use every spare drop of upstream freshwater to flush the encroaching salt from their agricultural fields. But they were fighting the laws of physics, and the intense, unforgiving Mesopotamian sun became their ultimate executioner. Instead of saving the crops, the extreme heat turned their newly engineered irrigation channels into giant evaporation pans. The freshwater vanished into the air, leaving behind ever-thickening layers of concentrated, toxic salt that choked out the barley fields. The Niĝin fish tablet archives record this structural economic decline not through panicked words, but through the cold, unyielding shift of data. As we track the cuneiform ledgers chronologically toward the city's final days, the freshwater species, the massive marsh carp that had fueled the empire's labor forces for centuries, gradually dwindle and disappear from the temple logs. In their place, the scribes begin recording only hardier, low-value marine fish and saltwater mollusks that could tolerate the suffocating salinity of the dying canals. The goddess Niġin was no longer presiding over an abundance of freshwater blessings, but auditing the final scrapings of a poisoned, drying marsh. Ultimately, the logistics of Niģin were no longer about imperial growth or economic dominance. They had narrowed down to the stark mechanics of baseline survival. The final clay tablets uncovered in the 2026 excavation at Tell Zurghul are not chaotic or frantic. They are remarkably calm, highly organized audits of a systematic evacuation. With the same bureaucratic precision they used to build their Venice, the scribes recorded the final movements of the state, lists of grain reserves, heavy metal tools, and sacred temple artifacts being carefully packed into boats and moved to newer urban centers further north, where the rivers still ran wild and fresh. They did not leave in a panic. They simply closed the ledgers on a world that had dried up beneath their feet. What we have ultimately uncovered within the wind-scoured trenches of Tell Zurghul is the first definitive, physical proof of how an extraterrestrial cosmic event can act as the direct catalyst for a devastating, localized environmental collapse. By meticulously mapping the complex astronomical vectors from the K8538 star map against the stark, salt-crusted physical soil layers, and matching them with the shifting, real-time economic data of the Niģin tablets, we are finally able to reconstruct the full, unvarnished picture of an ancient civilization's final days. We see a society not undone by a sudden, dramatic military invasion, but slowly unraveled by the irreversible shifting of their own waters. To understand why this historical reconstruction is so profound, we must recognize that the ancient Sumerians fundamentally did not distinguish between myth and science, the way our modern world does. To their deeply integrated worldview, a logistical error or an unrecorded discrepancy in a fish shipment at the temple docks was considered just as much of a spiritual failure, a direct breach of divine cosmic order, as it was a technical one. When they looked upward and saw the terrifying, brilliant path of the messenger streaking across the sky on that late June night, they did not treat it as an isolated astronomical anomaly. They recorded its trajectory with cold, mathematical precision because they understood an elemental truth that modern science is only now relearning: that the sky, the earth, and the waters beneath them are all part of one single, interconnected system. A disruption in one sphere would inevitably manifest as chaos in another. The chronicle of the silent lineage is far more than a tragic, distant story of an ancient culture swallowed by the desert sands. It is an urgent, flashing mirror held up to our own contemporary global infrastructure. It stands as a profound historical testament that even the most advanced supply chain logistics, the most rigid bureaucratic control, and the most precise astronomical or technological knowledge cannot save a civilization once it completely loses its delicate, vital balance with the water that sustains it. As our teams stand upon the blistering, shimmering white salt flats of Tell Zurghul, looking out over mounds that once looked down on a thriving, emerald-green marshland, we realize we are not merely looking at the romantic ruins of a forgotten empire. We are looking at a clear, ancient warning written in clay, waiting for us to read it before our own tides begin to turn. If you want to keep exploring the hidden connections between ancient cosmic mysteries and the lost logistics of our past, make sure to subscribe to Silent Lineage so you never miss another uncovered truth.